So you know that old prayer? It goes like this. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's the one that we give when you just gotta say it. You gotta say it. According to Annie Lamott, this is in fact one of the 3 essential prayers. Now, Episcopalians, I know, we kind of think that it needs to be formal. Gotta open a book. But this may not be as elegant, but it works. It's so in the moment. And Annie Lamott, in her book, Help Thanks Wow, one of my favorites of hers, she does say you can shorten it. She did over time. It went from thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, to, as she matured in her faith, thank you, God. And then sometimes just thanks. But you know what? I think she had something there with the first one. Because that huge litany of thank yous is exactly how I feel sometimes. Especially in those moments when I am the most truly grateful. In those times when there's just this unexpected and overwhelming sense of release. You know the ones. Like, oh, you've just dodged this bullet. And you just have to say it. Moments like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I just found my kid who wandered off in the shopping mall. Right? Or I got the job. I really wanted that job. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you know, the ones like, oh, our bus, it just crashed into the side of a mountain, but somehow we're unscathed. And the brakes did not fail on the other curve when we would have gone off a cliff. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's actually a true story. Well, you know those kinds of moments. You've all had them. The gratitude is just punched out of you. I know it's just not a time when you can step back and play it cool and go, thanks, God. Lamott calls these DEFCON 1 gratitude moments because we're just feeling all of that sense of, God, I really owe you big time right now. They're the kind of moments that, well, they just cannot compare to all the other types of gratitude that she lays out, things like what she calls second level thanks. Hey, you know what, God, this year was so much better than last, and I'm just now really realizing that, so thank you, God. Or those, what she calls third level gratitudes, all the little simple stuff that comes up serendipitously all the time, like, you know, you're late for school to pick up your kid or that job interview, and thanks, God, because there's parking space and it's not 5 blocks away. Thanks works just fine for all of those moments. It's perfect, but thanks cannot cover the full gamut of our gratitude and all of the ways that it makes itself known to us. I mean, think about that fellow at the center of today's gospel reading. I mean, do you think thanks Jesus would have covered it for him? He is on his knees in front of Jesus, and you can just hear the thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you flowing from his lips. Now, I'm not sure what to call him. Luke identifies this fellow as a leper and a Samaritan. But somehow the Samaritan leper, well, that doesn't feel respectful, not to my modern ears. So for today, we are going to call him the grateful one. Now, in that gospel that we had today, all 10 of those people had something amazing to be grateful for. But only one of them bothers to say it that we know of, which is kind of surprising given what we know about that whole story. Now, I'm sure that the rest of them will eventually get around to thanking God at some point after they have been fully declared clean by the religious authorities. So what's interesting to me is, why is it that the grateful one is so much more grateful that he turns around and acts on it right away? He wants to thank Jesus directly, face to face. And also, what exactly is he grateful for? What's the full scope of what's going on for him? All of the Bible commentaries that I read were quick to explain that what's called leprosy in the Bible is not necessarily the bacterial infection that we call Hansen's disease today. You know, you're going to get a medical lesson in church, did you? Bible gives us all sorts of opportunities. Now, it could have been one of the things that we're talking about here, because it was around back then, and it was spread widely along all of the trade routes in the Mediterranean at that time. But it's also never been all that transmissible. Apparently, only about 5% of people who are exposed directly, and that means really directly, not incidentally, actually go on to catch the infection. It's not one of those things that just spreads like wildfire. But in the ancient Near East, there was an incredibly high stigma associated with any and all visible skin conditions. And this was true across most of the cultures in biblical times. It's probably because they had no real understanding of what caused these kinds of issues. And guess what? You can't miss them, right? I mean, we can't always tell what's going on inside of a person, but you can see if something's going on with their skin. So as you can guess, all of these different skin conditions got lumped together in this word leprosy, or what gets translated to us as leprosy. Stuff like very benign, still quite uncomfortable things such as psoriasis, rashes, or in some cases possibly even severe acne, to short-term things that could be highly infectious, like measles and chickenpox. We all know how easily those spread, right? To rare and debilitating conditions like Hansen's disease. So in the absence of scientific understanding of all of this different stuff, most cultures in that time chose a one-size-fits-all approach, which was to just expel people that they could see were suffering from distressing-looking skin conditions, to push them out to the margins of communal life until such a time as their skin cleared up and they looked like they might be safe to invite back into regular society. Now, we can read about how this plays out under Jewish law in Leviticus. There we hear that skin sufferers of all sorts who didn't clear up within about 7 or 8 days' time had to live on the outside of the camp, and they had to wear special clothes so that you could tell that this was the case. And they had to even call out, "Unclean, unclean," when somebody tried to get too close to them. You can imagine that this kind of stigma and isolation felt awful. Couldn't see your family, couldn't go back to your house. But it was also pretty much par for the course wherever you would travel in Jesus' time. So the key point is that leprosy, that word that we hear in the Bible today, in their understanding, though was seen as a public health threat, it was also considered a threat to religious purity. And it was something that you could be stuck with long term or could possibly clear up. Covered all of that. And this would have been true in Jewish society and in Samaritan society. The priests, in both cases, were the public officials. You may have picked up by now, priests did a lot back then, including sort of quasi-CDC-like health-related priest's job to examine people in order to declare that they were clean and free to return back to society. That's why Jesus says, go present yourself to the priest. So back to our story. We have these 10 people. They have been expelled from village life because of some sort of persistent and visible skin condition, and they are appealing to Jesus for mercy. The wonderful thing about this story is Jesus, he didn't ask anything of them. He just says, go, you're healed. There are no strings attached. He does not ask anything of them. It doesn't hardly bat an eyelash, really. Now, some of them could have been relieved from terrible discomfort instantly. They could have felt it. Others might have relief from pain. Some of them might have been suffering for weeks, months, or even years. And some could have even lost hope of ever returning to society. But in this moment, all of them cannot wait to do one thing. They want to be officially readmitted to their community by the priests. They want to be allowed to return to their families and their homes and their lives. And you know what? Can you blame them? Except there's this one guy. Back to the grateful one, right? Because he's the one in this moment that recognizes more than just his own chances to be restored and return. He has what Annie Lamott would call a radical gratitude revelation. Because his thanks, they are profuse and they are overflowing, and they contain this profound recognition that the declaration of wellness that will transform everything about his life, it doesn't come from a public figure. It comes from God through the Jesus. That's why he has to stop and turn and prostrate himself and just let the thank yous out. So I wonder why he's the only one who gets it. Some commentators suggest that it's because he's an outsider, not just because of his skin condition, but also because he's a Samaritan. He might have expected that Jesus would just ignore him. That he would be shunned not just because of his condition, but also because who he was and where he was from. So maybe this opening up of grace extended beyond the immediate community is the thing that moved him to stop and kneel and call out praise to God. I mean, he did have this experience of being a double outsider, at least where he was living at this time. And maybe he had that kind of depth of insight so that he really could recognize the true source of his salvation. Or maybe he's just one of those people who gets it. I mean, you know how you've seen it. Most people just rush on by. They don't even notice all of those things that we have to be gracious and grateful for. And then there are those people who stop and they say, thank you, God. All we really do know about the grateful one is that he's the only one that took the time to acknowledge in that very moment how incredibly deeply Jesus' words had already written his life. He's the only one who could stop and turn away from that official release long enough to express his gratitude to the source of all gratitude. I think this is what Jesus said it means when he commends him for his faith. God has opened up a new way forward in this man's life, a way back into society and community and home. And he sees it, he acknowledges it, he understands. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, God. The grateful one's recognition of what's just happened and what it means and all of that hope that it kindles in him prompts him into grateful action. He doesn't just think it. It's no quick thanks. I mean, you could do that and still keep running towards the priests to get that certificate of approval, can't you? He says it with every fiber of his being, directly to Jesus and directly to God. Annie Lamott would call this radical gratitude. The kind of gratitude that transforms us so much that it makes us think not only, what have I gotten this day? What have I received? But also, what more can I give? Because I want to give. I feel like I need to give in response to you, God, and all that you have given me. That's the kind of gratitude that she says begins in our hearts. But then it spills out into our behavior, into everything that we do. You know those kinds of moments too, because they go way beyond this quick whoosh of relief. They're moments when we can fully recognize, even in the middle of something awful, that God has given us incredible people to walk with us and support us and keep us aloft. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, God. There are those kinds of moments when we have a second chance at health or love or a calling, and we realize, thank you, God, I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this to share and to serve and to pass on that gift. Thank you, thank you, thank you, God. I think we all have all of those opportunities for gratitude. We have the third level ones where we just say, thanks, God. And they give us chances to turn that into action, extra kindness, stopping to listen, or even just letting someone you know in front of you how much you care. Every time we hit level 2 understanding, like I just stopped and said, hey, my life is much better than it could be. It can spur in us not just thank you, God, but a thought of what else we could do to share or give or spread that knowledge that we've just gained. But in those DEFCON 1 gratitude moments, when we're feeling it with every fiber of our being, almost like it's vibrating in us, God, I really owe you this one big time. I invite all of us to turn that instantaneous thank you, thank you, thank you, God, into stories and acts of love, so that our transformation can be shared with others, and our hope that God's grace and welcome and salvation is there for us can be made known, so that others know that God's grace and welcome and salvation, it is there for them too. Amen.